There are moments in history that divide the world into two parts. A world that existed before, and a world that would never be the same again. For millions of people, August 6, 1945, was one of those moments. But for one ordinary engineer, it became the beginning of the most unbelievable survival story ever recorded. His name was Tsutomu Yamaguchi. He was not a general. He was not a politician. He was not a famous scientist. He was simply a husband, a father, and an engineer trying to return home after finishing a business trip. Like thousands of other Japanese citizens, he believed the war would end one day. He just never imagined that he would stand at the center of history when it happened. To understand his story, we must first return to Japan during the final summer of the Second World War. By the middle of 1945, the Japanese Empire was exhausted. Years of war had drained the country's economy. Factories struggled to produce equipment. Cities suffered almost daily air raids. Food was becoming harder to find. Fuel was running out. Every family carried the invisible weight of uncertainty. Yet life continued. Children still laughed on their way to school. Shopkeepers still opened their stores each morning. Factory whistles still echoed across industrial cities. People kept living because they had no other choice. Among them was 29-year-old Tsutomu Yamaguchi. He worked for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries as a marine engineer. His job required him to inspect shipbuilding projects in different cities. It was demanding work. Long hours. Constant travel. An endless responsibility. In the summer of 1945, his assignment brought him to Hiroshima. For several days he worked alongside engineers and technicians, checking designs and discussing production schedules. Despite the war, everyone tried to behave as if tomorrow would arrive like any other day. Finally, his work was complete. He packed his papers carefully, closed his suitcase, and prepared for the journey back to Nagasaki. Home. That single word filled his mind. His wife. His little son. His family. After days away from them, he could almost picture walking through the front door again. He had no idea that destiny had written a completely different ending for his journey. The evening before his departure, Hiroshima seemed unusually peaceful. The streets were quieter than usual. A gentle summer breeze moved through the city. People chatted outside small restaurants. Streetcars carried passengers home after work. The sky above Hiroshima looked perfectly calm. No one could see the aircraft that would arrive the following morning. No one could imagine the weapon it carried. Before sunrise on August 6, Tsutomu woke up early. He washed his face, collected his belongings, checked his travel documents one final time. Everything felt ordinary. Perhaps that was the most frightening part of history. The greatest disasters often begin on completely ordinary mornings. As he walked through the city, the streets slowly came alive. Workers hurried toward factories. Cyclists crossed busy intersections. Children smiled as they walked beside their parents. Nothing suggested that within a few minutes, an entire city would disappear beneath a single flash of light. At around 8 o'clock, Tsutomu made one last stop before heading toward the railway station. He looked up. Far above the clouds, a lone aircraft crossed the blue sky. It seemed too small to matter, too distant to fear. During the war, seeing American aircraft had become almost routine. Most people ignored them. Some barely looked up. No alarms echoed through the streets. No crowds rushed toward shelters. Life continued. and somewhere high above Hiroshima, history quietly counted down its final seconds. The aircraft high above Hiroshima looked harmless. It flew alone. There was no large bombing formation. No deafening roar from dozens of engines. Just one silver bomber crossing the morning sky. Very few people paid attention. Inside that aircraft, a crew of 12 men carried a weapon unlike anything the world had ever created. Its name was Little Boy. It was not the largest bomb ever built. But it was the first atomic bomb ever used in war. At exactly 8:15 in the morning, the bomb was released. For a few silent seconds, it fell toward the city below. No one on the ground knew it was coming. People continued walking. Streetcars continued moving. Workers continued their conversations. Life moved forward, completely unaware that history was only seconds away. Then, a flash. Not an ordinary flash. It was brighter than the rising sun. For a fraction of a second, the entire city disappeared inside a blinding white light. Many survivors later said they believed the sun had exploded. Others thought lightning had struck directly above them. No words could truly describe what they saw. Almost instantly, an enormous wave of heat spread across Hiroshima. The temperature near the center of the explosion reached several thousand degrees. Wood caught fire within seconds. Glass melted. Steel bent. Human shadows were burned onto stone walls. The blast wave followed immediately after, moving faster than a powerful hurricane. It crushed buildings, shattered windows, and threw thousands of people through the air. Tsutomu Yamaguchi felt the force before he understood what had happened. The explosion lifted him from the ground. His body was thrown violently into a nearby ditch. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. His ears rang with an unbearable sound. For several moments, everything became silent. Then came the screams. When he finally opened his eyes, nothing looked familiar anymore. The streets had vanished. Buildings that had stood only moments earlier were gone. Smoke climbed into the sky like a giant black mountain. Flames spread from house to house. People stumbled through the ruins. Some were covered in dust. Others had suffered terrible burns. Many called the names of loved ones who would never answer. Yamaguchi tried to stand. Pain shot through his body. His left arm had been badly burned. His face was covered with cuts. One eardrum had been damaged by the blast. Even breathing became difficult. But somehow, he was alive. He looked toward the center of the city. A massive cloud was rising into the sky. It grew higher and higher until it seemed to touch the heavens. No one standing on the ground understood what they were looking at. The mushroom cloud would soon become one of the most recognized images in human history. Yet, at that moment, it was simply a terrifying mystery. Yamaguchi knew only one thing. If he stayed there, he would die. So despite his injuries, he took his first painful step through the ruins of Hiroshima. Every step would reveal another scene that no human being should ever have to witness. And the worst was still waiting ahead. Every step Tsutomu Yamaguchi took felt heavier than the last. His body was in pain. His vision was blurred. But stopping was not an option. The city around him had become almost impossible to recognize. Familiar streets had disappeared beneath mountains of broken wood, twisted steel, and shattered stone. Only a few hours earlier, Thousands of people had walked these roads. Now, silence was broken only by distant cries for help. Smoke covered the sky so completely that sunlight struggled to reach the ground. Ash drifted through the air like black snow. The smell of burning wood mixed with smoke, dust, and fuel. Yamaguchi looked around in disbelief. People moved slowly through the ruins. Many were badly injured. Some carried family members on their backs. Others searched desperately through collapsed buildings, hoping to find someone still alive. Nobody knew where to go. Nobody knew who was in charge. Hospitals had been destroyed. Police stations were gone. Communication had completely collapsed. The city had lost all sense of order. As Yamaguchi continued walking, he reached the edge of a neighborhood that had completely vanished. There were no houses. No shops. Only empty foundations and smoking debris. It was difficult to believe that people had lived there only that morning. He paused for a moment. Not because he wanted to rest, but because his mind refused to accept what his eyes were seeing. This was no ordinary bombing. It was something the world had never experienced before. Without understanding the science behind it, the survivors already understood one terrible truth. Nothing could have prepared them for this. Despite his injuries, Yamaguchi forced himself to keep moving. He knew that somewhere beyond the smoke lay the railway station. If the tracks still existed, if the trains were still running, there was a chance he could return to Nagasaki. The journey itself seemed impossible. Yet the thought of seeing his wife and young son gave him strength. Hour after hour, he walked through the shattered city. Occasionally he stopped to help someone climb over fallen debris. Sometimes he shared water with strangers. Other times, there was simply nothing he could do except continue forward. As evening approached, the fires grew larger. Entire city blocks burned without interruption. The sky turned dark red. Columns of smoke climbed higher and higher into the evening sky. Many survivors believed the entire world was burning. When darkness finally arrived, very few people slept. Thousands gathered wherever they could find open ground. Some whispered prayers. Others stared silently at the flames. Many waited for family members who would never return. That night, Yamaguchi barely closed his eyes. His burns continued to ache. His ears still rang from the explosion. But one thought remained clear. He had to go home. The following morning, against every expectation, some railway lines were still operating. The damage was enormous. But a path out of Hiroshima still existed. Weak, exhausted, and covered in bandages, Tsutomu Yamaguchi boarded a train. He believed he was leaving the nightmare behind. He believed the worst was finally over. He could not have been more wrong. Hundreds of kilometers away, another city was beginning an ordinary summer morning. Its name was Nagasaki. And history was preparing to repeat itself. When Tsutomu Yamaguchi finally arrived in Nagasaki, his body was barely holding together. His arms were wrapped in bandages. His face was burned. Every movement reminded him of the explosion he had survived. But despite everything, he was grateful to be home. His wife was shocked when she saw him. She had never seen him in such terrible condition. For hours, he tried to explain what had happened in Hiroshima. He described a single flash, a wave of unbearable heat, and an entire city disappearing within seconds. It sounded impossible. Even those closest to him struggled to believe what they were hearing. How could one bomb destroy an entire city? At that time, no one in Nagasaki truly understood the power of an atomic weapon. The next morning, despite his injuries, Yamaguchi reported to work. His supervisor looked at the bandages covering his body and asked what had happened. Yamaguchi began describing the events in Hiroshima. He spoke slowly. He explained the flash, the heat, the blast, the black cloud rising into the sky. Some of his co-workers listened in silence. Others found the story difficult to believe. One man quietly replied, "A single bomb cannot destroy an entire city," before Yamaguchi could answer. The room suddenly filled with an intense white light, brighter than anything he had ever seen. Again, for one horrifying moment, time seemed to stop. Then came another violent shockwave. The windows exploded inward. The walls shook. The building trembled under the force of the blast. Yamaguchi threw himself to the floor. His heart raced. His mind refused to believe what was happening. Not again. It couldn't be happening again. But it was. At exactly 11:02 in the morning, the United States dropped a second atomic bomb. This bomb was called Fat Man, its target, the city of Nagasaki. Although Yamaguchi was farther from the center of the explosion than he had been in Hiroshima, the blast still caused widespread destruction. Smoke filled the streets. Buildings collapsed. Fires spread rapidly across the city. People ran in every direction. The peaceful city he had returned to only hours before was now another disaster zone. For the second time in 3 days, Tsutomu Yamaguchi walked through a city destroyed by an atomic bomb. No one could have imagined such a thing. Surviving one atomic bombing seemed impossible. Surviving two was beyond belief. His first thought was not about himself. It was about his family. He rushed home as quickly as his injured body would allow. Every second felt endless. Every street brought new fear. When he finally reached his neighborhood, he searched desperately for his wife and son. Against all odds, they were alive. They had survived. Not because of luck alone, but because they had been protected by the landscape surrounding parts of the city and had sought shelter at a critical moment. Relief washed over him. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to breathe. But around them, thousands of other families would never experience that relief. Nagasaki had become the second city in history to suffer the unimaginable. And Tsutomu Yamaguchi had now witnessed both tragedies with his own eyes. He had escaped death twice. But surviving would prove easier than living with those memories. For the second time in just 3 days, Tsutomu Yamaguchi had escaped an atomic explosion. His body had survived, but his mind carried wounds that no doctor could ever heal. The days that followed were filled with silence. Across Japan, families searched through the ruins for loved ones. Many never found them. Entire neighborhoods had disappeared. Thousands of names would never be spoken again. And those who survived faced another invisible danger. They had been exposed to radiation. At the time, almost no one understood what radiation could do to the human body. People who looked healthy one day could suddenly become seriously ill the next. Doctors struggled to explain the strange symptoms. Hair began to fall out. High fevers appeared without warning. Many survivors became weaker with every passing week. For Tsutomu Yamaguchi, recovery was painfully slow. The burns on his arms slowly healed. But the memories never faded. Every loud sound reminded him of the explosions. Every column of smoke brought back images of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. He often wondered, why had he survived when so many others had not? Then, on August 15, 1945, everything changed. For the first time in history, the people of Japan heard the voice of Emperor Hirohito speaking directly to the nation. He announced that Japan would accept surrender. The Second World War was finally over. After nearly 6 years of destruction, the fighting had ended. Across the country, some people cried with relief. Others stood in complete silence. For many families, there was no celebration. The people they loved would never come home. Life slowly began to move forward. Cities were rebuilt. Factories reopened. Children returned to school. Japan started one of the greatest rebuilding efforts in modern history. Yamaguchi also returned to work. He tried to live a normal life. He focused on his family. He watched his son grow up. He continued working as an engineer. For many years, he rarely spoke about what had happened. The memories were simply too painful. But as time passed, he realized something important. The people who had witnessed those terrible days were growing older. One day, there would be no survivors left to tell the story. If they remained silent, future generations might forget the true cost of war. So Yamaguchi made a decision. He began sharing his experiences. Not to gain fame, not to become a public figure, but to remind the world that nuclear weapons are not just machines of war. They are weapons that change human lives forever. In 2009, more than 60 years after the bombings, the Japanese government officially recognized Tsutomu Yamaguchi as a survivor of both Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was a rare and historic acknowledgement. His story became known around the world. Not because he was the strongest man, not because he was the luckiest, but because he carried a message that humanity needed to hear. War always creates winners on paper. But for ordinary people, war leaves only loss. Broken homes, broken cities, and memories that never disappear. Tsutomu Yamaguchi passed away in 2010. He was 93 years old. But his story did not end with his death. It lives on in museums, in history books, in documentaries, and in the voices of those who continue to tell future generations what happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. His life reminds us of one simple truth. Human beings can survive incredible suffering. But true courage is not only surviving. True courage is remembering and choosing peace instead of repeating the mistakes of the past. Because history is not only about what happened. History is about what we choose to learn from it. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed true historical documentaries based on real events, don't forget to subscribe. And tell us in the comments, which forgotten story from history should we uncover next?